Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from the Black Business School, and you know that credit problems, credit repair, debt, etc., is a huge problem for lots and lots of people. And one of the things that people don't know is that there are some really underhanded tactics being used to collect on these debts that are actually, in the opinion of some, actually violating American freedoms, fundamental freedoms that we thought we had. And to speak on this issue, I heard from my very good friend Ken Williams, who is a former police detective with the Brockton Police Department. He spent 20 years on the force, but he now spends most of his life really doing what he can to help people, supporting whistleblowers and things like that. And so Ken's just a great resource. And so, without further ado, I want to ask Ken, how you doing today, man?
Thank you, Doctor, for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. So you were telling me that you had been doing some work and some investigation on some pretty shady tactics being used by companies to collect debts from consumers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Certainly, I think a lot of folks, there are millions of people each and every year for many different reasons that fall behind on credit card debt, for instance. The tactics that are being used by big banks to try to go and get people to pay those debts, some of those tactics are illegal. And it's important that I believe people understand that they have rights, that when illegal tactics are used, they do have a remedy. But unfortunately, in order to get to the point of the remedy, if they receive a summons in the mail and they have to appear in court, that not appearing in court is an instant default, which then there is no remedy for. They get the full brunt of what of that debt that the debt collector is trying to collect, garnished against their wages. They have liens put on their homes. They could have cars repossessed to go and cure the debt. All types of nasty things can happen. They can even have a capias warrant issued for them to appear in court, which could make them lose days of pay and stuff. So these are very, very serious issues.
Interesting, interesting. So basically, it sounds to me like you're saying that they're sort of using the legal system to find ways to really strong arm people into paying things to pay more than what they owe first and foremost, but then also losing things that they need, and which kind of puts them in a deeper hole. Um, in fact, I'd actually read somewhere where some people are actually ending up behind bars over this kind of stuff. Are you seeing anything like that?
Well, I know here in Massachusetts, roughly 57,000 people have had liens placed on their homes. 57,000 people. In some instances, some people are being jailed for failure to pay the debt. Some banks are charging off the debt. Then a third party comes along and says, "Well, we bought the debt." And then a lot of folks aren't aware of the process of the transfer of sale from one company to another company is a business record, and the business record has to support that there's an actual debt. Some people aren't even aware that they have insurance that'll cover the debt in the event of a job loss, disability, and voluntary separation from a job. And they're getting notices from banks and third parties to pay the debt when in fact it should have been paid for by insurance. They're just not aware. So what ends up happening is because these people are very vulnerable, they're stressed out, there are other things going on in their lives. Some people just don't answer the summons in the mail because maybe it's amongst all of the other things that are going on in their lives that are, in turmoil. And when they don't answer that summons, a magistrate judge or a judge can issue a default, which means that they are responsible for every dime dollar that the debt collector has claimed they're due, but it hasn't had to prove in court is owed.
Hmm. So, um, are there? I mean, is there work being done? I guess on a congressional level or anywhere else to kind of help in this situation? Are our politicians helping consumers, or are they helping creditors? In this back and forth.
The courts today are being used as a debt collection agency. It's debtor's hell if you don't show up in court because just because someone sues you doesn't mean that what they're suing you for is true. They've got to come to court and prove that you actually owe that debt. And they also have to prove that they have the rights to the debt that might have been charged off. And oftentimes, when people go to court and they stand toe to toe with the credit agency, with certain defenses. Maybe the credit agency can't produce the original documents because those are no longer available. Then they can't prove that you owe that debt. Sometimes they can't even prove true statements, all of the debt to show that what they're alleging is owed is true and accurate. They'd have to go and show that they transferred the debt and that the originator of the loan or debt maybe didn't try to cure that debt. Some people file bankruptcy and cure these debts, but yet and still they're still brought into court stating that they're owing a debt. So, this is a very serious problem. But the biggest issue I want people to recognize is that if they don't show up to court to answer the summons and they get a default against them, they can then owe that debt out of default, and they never even had a chance and opportunity to defend themselves. And that just seems wrong.
Well, I mean, it's certainly wrong. I mean, it almost sounds like we're in a situation where the burden of proof is not really put on the appropriate party, right? That I could just show up and say, "Hey, Ken Williams owes me $50,000," and if you didn't see the summons for whatever reason, I get there and they just strike the gavel and say, "Okay, Ken has to pay Boyce 50,000," and you've never, I never gave you anything. I never actually made a loan to you. So, what are some ways that consumers might protect themselves from some of this tyranny? And I'm gonna tell you this, Ken. I really believe that it's gonna get worse. I really think that as American consumers get hammered with more and more debt, it's gonna really translate more and more into a form of slavery. In that you're going to have people that are literally going to end up slaving for corporations to pay back debts that they really can't repay with the wages that American workers make. The American workers' wage has not increased very much over the last 20 years, but CEO wages have gone up. Shareholder income has increased, so what I see a trend where you've got products being made in other countries, like Air Jordans being made in China for $15, but they're being sold to American consumers for $250. Because these consumers are addicted to consumption, they believe they need to get these things. So how do they buy them? Well, their wages can't really afford them, so they use debt, right? They're pulling out the credit card, so the credit card bills stack up, the student loan debt stacks up, the medical debt stacks up. So debt collectors are saying, okay, we've got all these IOUs. How do we collect on this? Well, politicians, as we know, are owned by corporations, right? If they pay their lobbyists enough money, they can get them to pass any law. So what do? They then get the power of the government behind them to say, if you don't pay this debt, we can take everything you have. If you don't pay this debt, we can issue a warrant or some other kind of warrant on you for some sort of contempt of court or something, right? And then somehow you end up in jail. So we're not directly incarcerating you for owing a debt. It's not a true debtor's prison in the purest sense, but it becomes a de facto debtor's prison because the poorest people, the ones who are struggling under the debt the most, are the ones most likely to be hit by this. So I think I really believe it's going to get worse. Based on what you're seeing, I mean, do you think there are any ways that consumers can really sort of fight back on this on a personal level as well as a collective level?
I think collectively, having these discussions in public about this major billion-dollar industry that is just trying to rape people of their money, of their wealth, and garnish their wages and take their money and take property and stuff like that. We have to have these open discussions, but at the same time, we have to empower people with the true knowledge that they can fight these things. I mean, think about it today. If tomorrow on Monday court opens and let's say tomorrow was a day that the civil process proceedings were happening, if all the people that showed up that had a summons to appear showed up and said, I want a jury trial, what would that do to the backlog of the court? It would basically freeze the court. The court would have to listen to every single argument. That's one issue that the courts don't want to deal with, and that's an issue that the creditors are hoping that people don't do. But that's their right. It's their right to go and be able to go and challenge these type of tactics to collect on things. And what I want folks to understand is that there's what's called a forward flow agreement that flows between the bank and the third party. And oftentimes in these forward flow agreements that I've read, it'll say that the debtor is collecting or acquiring this debt for pennies on a dollar. So if If the person who is said to owe a debt owes a couple $1,000s in a credit card bill, the debt collector third party is acquiring this debt for less than $100 in most instances. But yet, if you default, they want the $2,000. So for them, it's a get rich quick scheme because a lot of folks will default. And when folks default, they're just opening up their purse and giving these people who are shysters their money, giving them their assets and stuff like that. And they are getting into a cycle now of control because you now have a debt that's hanging over your head that a judge is going to say you owe. And by the way, if you don't pay it, in some instances, depending on the state, you might go to jail. And that to me is debtor's prison.
Well, what I would say to people is that there are a couple of laws that you want to look into to make sure that you know your rights when you get those bill collectors calling you. There is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which pretty much explains what a bill collector is and is not allowed to do. There are things they can't do, like they can't call you really early or really late at night. They can't call you at work once you tell them to not call you at work. They can't call you repeatedly. They can't verbally abuse you. They can't call your friends and neighbors, etc. And so that's one thing. The other is the what is it? Fair Credit Reporting Act, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And that's basically something that you want to, that helps you understand just your access to your credit report, how the bureaus have to respond to you, things like that. And if I'm not mistaken, in 2009, there's actually a Credit Card Act. If I'm right, maybe Ken can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but those are some of the things you might want to peek at, so you just kind of know what your rights are as a debtor. But also, what I would then say too is that an ounce of prevention really is worth a pound of cure. You can get prevention for pennies on the dollar, and cure will cost you a whole lot more. So the prevention is be cautious about debt. Know the difference between good and bad debt, like we discuss in the Black Wealth Boot Camp on a regular basis. You want to avoid debt unless there's a reason to take on the debt, and a very bad reason to take on the debt is to buy some overpriced consumer item, because that is designed to get you into various forms of financial addiction, which lead to various forms of slavery. There's never been a time where an addict is in control of their destiny. An addict usually is a slave to the drug. In this case, the drug might be credit and debt and consumption. So I want to say thank you, Ken. I appreciate this information.
No, no, thank you, doctor, for having me. And I hope people maybe listen to this and take heed. That act that you're talking about is United States Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. That was enacted to go in to protect citizens. Make sure that they're not being abused.
Yes, I should have let you say it. You always say it better than I do.
No,
Just in case anybody wants to know, Ken used to be a police detective, but he's also a good brother. But he should be a lawyer. He's my Johnny Cochran. That's for sure. All right. Well, everybody, it was great talking to you, and thank you guys for watching. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from the Black Wealth Boot Camp. This is Mr. Ken Williams. You can find out more about Ken at kwillservices.com. Is that correct, Ken?
that's correct, doctor. Thank you.
There you go. kwillservices.com. KWILL.
Services.
Okay, I want to make sure people get that right. All right. All right. So everybody, until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.